Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honorable colleagues, distinguished senators, I rise today to speak on C-4, the government's bill Making Life More Affordable for Canadians Act. While this bill has been with us for quite some time, I do believe that it is an important piece of legislation that will deliver much-needed relief for many Canadians. As you know, C-4 will first legislate the delivery of the government's middle-class tax cut, which is targeted at providing tax relief for nearly 22 million Canadians and saving two-income families up to $840 a year. The bill will also provide for the elimination of the goods and service tax for first-time home buyers on new homes valued at up to $1 million, which would save them up to $50,000 on that purchase. And it would also lower GST for first-time home buyers on new homes valued between $1 and $1.5 million. And on top of that, Bill C-4 would legislate the removal of the consumer carbon price following its cancellation effective April 1st, 2025. The government's carrying out its commitment to deliver a middle-class tax cut to nearly 22 million Canadians. This is all money that Canadians will then be able to spend where it matters most for them. The government reduced the federal personal income tax rate from 15% to 14% for the lowest bracket, effective July 1st, 2025. In 2026, this is the tax rate that it will be applied up to $50,523 of taxable income. This means that virtually anyone who pays federal income tax will benefit from this. Nearly half of the total value of the tax relief is going to those in the lowest bracket. It's important to note that the Revenue Canada Agency has already updated its source deduction tables. They did this so to ensure that employers and pay administrators were able to reduce tax withholdings as of July 1st, 2025. This means that Canadians have already begun benefiting from this lower tax rate. This middle-class tax cut is expected to deliver more than $27 billion in tax savings to Canadians over 5 years, starting in 25-26. And it's only fair to say that it represents a significant support for Canadians facing broad challenges of affordability, especially during these uncertain financial times. Colleagues, Bill C-4 also brings forward an important measure to make housing more affordable in this country. As some of you may have heard, Desjardins Economic Studies published a report last year concluding that, and I quote, "Over the past quarter century, the average selling price of a home in Canada has ballooned by more than 4 times, while average household disposable income has only slightly more than doubled," end quote. The report then adds that, and I quote, "benchmark home prices now consistently exceed what the average household can afford in several provinces," end quote. This is definitely worrisome, and I'm of the view that something has to be done to address this housing access issue. The government has already rolled out a number of measures to make housing more affordable. For example, the government has in recent years implemented a series of measures aimed at both increasing the supply of housing and also helping Canadians make that first down payment on a home. And now, Bill C-4 would complement these measures by eliminating the GST for first-time home buyers on purchases of new homes valued up to $1 million. This new first-time home buyers GST rebate would mean upfront savings of up to $50,000 on the purchase of their first newly built home. Upon receiving royal assent, the rebate would also lower the GST on new homes between $1 million and $1.5 for first-time home buyers. In short, the rebate would be phased out in a linear manner for new homes valued between $1 and $1.5 million. Under this linear phase-out, a new home valued at $1.25 million would be eligible for a rebate of 50% of the maximum first-time homebuyer's GST rebate, which still means a savings of $25,000. The Parliamentary Budget Officer concluded, based on the support parameters, that the new first-time homebuyer's GST rebate included in the legislation would provide an average subsidy of around $27,000 to first-time homebuyers on the purchase of a new home. That's very significant. So by supporting Bill C-4, we would allow the government to lower the upfront cost of buying a new home for young Canadians and spur construction of new homes across this country. And by doing so, we would also be helping more young people and families to achieve their dream of home ownership and begin investing in their future, their families, their peace, and their comfort and their retirement. Colleagues, one of the first things this Prime Minister Carney, did upon assuming his responsibilities last year was to cease the application of the federal consumer fuel charge effective April 1st, 2025. However, it's important to understand that this was effectively accomplished through government regulations. Bill C-4 would now take the next step beyond the regulatory, ceasing the fuel charge by completely removing the federal consumer carbon price from Canadian law. As a result, the fuel charge would be permanently repealed. That being said, the government said this doesn't change anything to its commitment to fight climate change. For example, the government has been clear that a price on pollution for large emitters will continue to be a key component of its plan to build a strong economy and greener future. Industrial carbon pricing is one of the most important greenhouse gas emission reduction policies in the government's plan to meet Canada's 2030 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target. Carbon pricing systems for industry are also designed to keep costs low to protect against competitiveness risks, while driving investment in the technologies that will shape clean economies of the future and creating good Canadian jobs. As many of you know that have been following the bill, it also includes some technical provisions to clarify Parliament's long-established intent that the activities of federal political parties relating to personal information fall exclusively under federal jurisdiction and the Canada Elections Act. This provision would clarify that federal political parties cannot be required to comply with provincial personal information protection laws in keeping with Parliament's intent that the Canada Elections Act provides for a national, uniform, exclusive, and complete personal information protection regime for these parties across Canada. This has been the case since May 31st, 2000, which is when the Canada Elections Act was repealed and replaced through major modernization. The bill also proposes additional requirements for federal political parties' personal information policy going forward, including that it first be available in both official languages, be written in plain language, state the types of personal information it retains, uses, discloses, disposes of, and it explain how the party carries its activities in relation to personal information using illustrative examples. Eligible and registered federal political parties and persons acting on their behalf would need to ensure that they comply with this personal information protective policies. While Parliament's intent on these matters is long established, the explicit inclusion of these measures in Bill C-4 ensures greater clarity of this intent and timely implementation. Ensuring the clarity in Canada's laws and legislation is an important priority for any government, and yet another benefit that would flow from Bill C-4. In conclusion, colleagues, Bill C-4 is an important piece of legislation that would allow the government to implement, among other things, its middle-class tax cut for hardworking Canadians, saving them both hundreds of dollars a year. Bill C-4 would also make the first-time home buyers guide GST rebate a reality. This measure would save eligible first-time home buyers up to $50,000 on the purchase of a new home valued at $1 million, and allowing savings to extend way up to on new homes valued at up to 1.5. And finally, Bill C-4, it would permanently legislate the removal of the federal consumer fuel charge. This would allow the government to refocus and reinforce the carbon pollution reduction efforts in a way that is fair to Canadians and supportive of clean growth. Taken together, these measures would deliver help and make life more affordable for Canadians during these uncertain times. As you know, the global landscape is rapidly changing, leaving economies, businesses, and workers under a cloud of uncertainty. As Canadians continue to feel the impact of these ongoing challenges, including the uncertainties brought about by developments on trade and tariff fronts, I believe that its time is right to deliver some tax relief. I would, as a result, invite you all, esteemed colleagues, to support the passage of C-4 so that the government can deliver the support to Canadians in this timely manner. Thank you very much. Miigwech. Merci.
Senator Wallen, Senator Batters, and Senatrice Mivet-Deschênes.
Will the Senator
Thank you.
So the Senator take a question?
Yes.
Thank you for your remarks, and I think if we can just set aside some of the arguments that you've made about the benefits to consumers and taxpayers and all of that, the bone of contention here, as raised by many of us over time, has been the implanting of this section about skirting privacy rights for political parties snuck into a bill. It does not belong here in any way, shape, or form, and we'd like to be able to have that discussion separate from the benefits that might accrue to taxpayers from that. So I still have not heard an adequate explanation, other than straight-up politics, as to why this has been inserted in this bill and does not allow us to have a discussion about something that's fundamentally important. It's fundamentally important whether political parties are exempt from the privacy laws of this country, and whether there are any controls at all on our personal data, and this is an issue we deal with on many fronts, any controls at all on what those parties can do with our personal information. A fine down the road which we would have no way of ever determining whether our data had been sold or misused or misrepresented. And I guess I'm just asking one more time if you would appeal to those in power to take this section out so it can properly be debated.
Senator Cuzner.
Thank you very much, Senator Wallen, and I appreciate your comments about parts 1, 2, and 3 and the benefit to Canadians. On part 4, obviously, there were significant interventions on that aspect of the bill. As far as the government and those representing the government were clear in their intent. Their position was that this particular aspect is about jurisdiction. This is about federal parties not having to comply with provincial laws, not a patchwork of provincial laws. You know, unlike the federal parties, when you look at the financing of federal parties, there's one rule across the country for financing of federal parties. They don't have to comply with, because every province has different rules. The parties themselves, it's not a complete vacuum either. The parties have to present their privacy policies, have to post them online. And very good questions from Senator Daskal, very good questions from Senator Dalphon during committee. and they quizzed them on the PIPEDA rules, the 10 rules of PIPEDA, and they threw out the, do you have this, do you have this, do you have this, do you have to report in case of a breach, all those. Each one of the three parties that were represented during the testimony, they all had those aspects on their website as part of their privacy policy. So, there's a compliance there. But again, I know you're not going to like this one, but there's nothing precludes us from going further. I think that one thing the hearings showed us, one thing that committee showed us, and it's the first time I sat on legal, I want to commend the legal committee for the depth and the breadth of the questions and the quality of those that presented. But it shows us that this is a big issue, certainly an important issue, and I would think, I'm convinced, the political parties would like to see this as well. But this is not the bill to do that. There has to be another bill to go forward. So that would be my position.
Senator Wallen?
I think you've just made my point for me. This is not the bill in which to be having a discussion on a point of very fundamental principle about our own personal data, access, privacy. You know all of the arguments. The question is, can we, at this 11th hour, please make some attempt to rescue a proper debate to be held in this chamber? We've heard this point made by others. This is not only our privilege to have a debate, it's our responsibility. This is what the Chamber of Sober Second Thought does. It takes legislation that is sometimes created on the back of an envelope or snuck into a bill and in a Trojan horse way. We've seen it lots because they don't want to have the debate. But this is not just another government handout or another measure that may or may not pass. This is not a fiscal measure. This is a fundamental measure. And we don't want to be held to ransom here, that by saying no to this bill and to this because of provision number 4, because of Section 4, that we would be denying Canadians access to government funds and help in difficult times. Just take it out. Let us have a proper debate. That is our job, to look at these very fundamental issues, debate it, take it out of there, get on with your other measures, make that case, which you have, and let us in this chamber do the job that we are here to do. Our constitutional obligation is to do that and study these contentious pieces of legislation and not have them slipped by in another bill hidden under the cover of aid to the Canadian population.
Thank you very much, Senator. And I guess that's why we're having this debate today, so those points can be made to have an impact going forward. I know that the broader issue that it's spread like a wildfire is the role of the Senate, and this particular bill prompted that. I guess there were two bills this week that prompted that discussion, and that's a broader one, but I appreciate her intervention. Again, the government contends that this is about jurisdiction and not allowing the federal parties having to be governed by provincial legislation.
Senator Batters.
Thanks very much. Thank you for your speech, Senator Cuzner, and thanks for coming to the Legal Committee. It was nice to have you there during the time that you were there. One of the things that we heard during that kind of marathon day, I think we had 8 hours of Legal Committee in one day, and one of the things we heard was a panel which actually had each of the political parties' chief counsel from three of the major political parties, the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, and the New Democratic Party, and they were giving what I thought was actually quite cogent evidence about what that part 4, why that was needed. And they talked about this national framework so that we don't have 13 different provincial and territorial frameworks, and how that would potentially help Canadians' privacy. I didn't hear anything very much in your speech about that panel and what evidence they gave us, but if you could just provide us a little more information about that, please.
Senator Cuzner.
Again, I thought they presented their case as well during the testimony, and so much of the testimony was around, and so many of the interventions were around policy. Again, they continue to go back to jurisdiction. But it was unanimous from those that presented. They believe in a single, comprehensive, exclusive, uniform national regime. All three advocated for that. I know there was Miss Dedman, that former, she worked in the UK and in BC and in privacy, and she had talked about the model they use in the UK, and where they have a policy, but there are special provisions for companies, for government, and for political parties. And that would be something that would be explored. And I know it was mentioned by two of the lawyers that they would appreciate looking at that type of legislation. And I think that could be done in a broader study on this. So I thought they had the presentation they had was pretty concise around the jurisdiction only in this piece. But again, I think they all recognize that privacy is paramount. And they have no objections to going with a deeper dive on it.
Senator Batters.
Thank you. And also with respect to unanimity, as you were just referencing, I just referred to what we also heard about is the House of Commons. When they had a vote on this, the only standing vote that they had on Bill C-4 was at second reading, I believe June 2024. And then what that vote count was, every single MP who voted on it voted for it. And that wasn't a matter of political parties. That was every Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Green Bloc, every single one of them voted for it. And we talk about deference, the important deference that we as an unelected chamber must have. And yes, we need to provide sober second thought, but we also have to be cognizant of that. And I ask you this question as someone who sat in that other place for 20 years as a Liberal MP in government and opposition, and now are sitting here. So can you please tell us about what you see as the important deference that we should have to people who have been doing that door knocking and hearing from their constituents, and who are responsible to sit in the House of Commons to make those votes on behalf of the constituents of their riding?
Senator Cuzner.
I guess the first word would be shock that all parties come together and support something unanimously, and rare would be the other word. And so I think it does. It sends a strong message to this place, but I know, and I listened to Senator Simons, a few months back, and speaking about the Salisbury provisions and what have you. And I know that this isn't mentioned in the platform of the parties, but this was an ongoing issue. It was before the courts. It was known. So I think difference does. I think it does matter in this case. But again, as I try to figure this place out, I was the newest member of the Ledge, so it was a real experience for me in a lot of ways. But to have something that unique, to see the parties come together and support it like that, they share a special, exclusive piece of real estate where people put their name on a ballot and go out. And I know there's a number of people in the chamber here that have done that, and to do that, and then to rally the support of volunteers to come out, 343 different ridings across this country. We ask Canadians to step up, and they do that willingly. We pretty much do it by volunteers for the most part. And the one thing that was consistent with the reps from the government is that it does put, to have 13 different regimes that they would have to respond to puts a fairly significant burden on the federal parties. So again, they went back to the fact that they believe in a national regime, uniform regime, and they're willing to work toward that.
Senator Miville-Deschênes. Would you take another question, Senator?
Donc, personne ici ne...
No one here is challenging the idea that political parties should be under provincial jurisdiction. That's not the issue, but I'm finding it difficult to understand the government's logic. We had 8 hours of hearings, and we heard the Privacy Commissioner also, Philippe Dufresne, who is not just anyone, who came to say that this bill needs to be amended several ways for it to comply with fundamental principles of privacy protection in Canada. The first of those principles is consent. Imagine that in this bill, it is not mandatory to obtain the consent of a voter to obtain their personal information. This goes against all legislation in Canada on privacy. In 2026, how can you defend a bill that does not oblige political parties to seek voters' consent to go and get a whole bunch of their private information? It seems inconceivable to me.
Well, thanks very much, and my interpretation wasn't great, but I thought I heard you be supporting it with the vote. The issue around privacy, I'll go back to the fact that the parties know and realize that it's significant, it's important. But, when we look back, there was an important piece of legislation here before Parliament prorogued and before the writ was dropped, and C-65 that died on the order paper. Had many of the provisions in it, but it made it to second reading. It was a complex, contentious, in some ways, contentious piece of legislation. And so I would think if we're looking for a standalone piece of legislation, then yes, something like C-65 should probably come forward again, I would think. But, I don't think there's any objections to going further with protections of personal information. It's just the fact that this is about the provincial, any kind of provincial jurisdiction in the federal parties.
Senator Miville-Deschênes, once again, I feel a little speechless because C-65, in fact, had several of those clauses which allowed us to think that privacy was being protected by political parties. So the bill was drafted. There were several clauses that were relevant. You could have taken that bill and replaced Part 4 with that. That would have resolved the issue. It doesn't seem so complicated to me.
Well, obviously, it does for the government. I would hope that, and the sense I get, is that the government itself understands the need for legislation around this, and it would be forthcoming. That's my hope and my sense, and we'll wait for that. That's the best I can offer you.
Senator Deakin, Nova Scotia.
Thank you. Would my honourable colleague from Cape Breton take another question?
Yes.
Senator Deakin.
Thank you, Senator Cuzner. One of the things that was said that I read in the Blues was the Commissioner of Elections pointed out the fact that each privacy regime has got vague language that the political parties have and is frequently changed. And they're not aligned. They're all different. And so this is the second time we've seen the language national, uniform, exclusive, and complete. And it's the second time we've seen uniform and complete missing. We see national and exclusive. And that's where the doubt comes from, that this is a priority. And for me, it goes back to 2018 with that really consequential report that the Ethics Committee produced. and it was unanimously supported by the MPs on ETHI. I didn't see you among the group, but there was a lot of names that we all recognize and that went through that. It had 26 recommendations, none of which have been implemented. And the government of the day responded, and I'll quote Minister Gould at the time, "We share the view that it's necessary to modernize our privacy regime to ensure it provides clear enforceable rules and supports the level of privacy protection that Canadians expect. The committee's most recent recommendations in this regard are valuable in their contribution to the government's ongoing privacy modernization efforts." But there hasn't been anything since 2018. Yes, a bill was tabled, C-65, but what was really interesting was listening to the lawyers, and I'll just get to my question. Thank you, Your Honor. Listen to the lawyers saying that there's 117 new members of Parliament, new backbenchers for the most part. That's why they couldn't include C-65 in this bill. I have to believe that I doubt that those 117 new MPs in the backbench have enough sway to hold up a piece of government legislation. So I just wonder, how are we to be convinced that you're serious with your words? I believe you are, but the government actually is going to do something at this point that is respective of international standards as it relates to the privacy of political parties, knowing that these standards need to be different than a corporation. In what ways? We got to see that defended. But what's your answer to that? Because I think that's a fundamental concern here.
Senator Cuzner.
I think you've articulated the concerns of the chamber very well, Senator Deakin, and I appreciate your sense of belief in me. The government officials did, they spoke about single, comprehensive, inclusive, uniform national regime, and they talked about that. As we get into these things, I was surprised myself that it was up to the parties to put together their own privacy. That surprised me. Now, I was pleased to say when the principle of around that, when they were quizzed on it, that they did come up and they did have something for the right to correct. Each of the parties, they were asked, do you have something right to correct, duty to report in case of breach, undertaking not selling or sharing information. The ones that they were quizzed on, they all had it as part of their policy, and it's all posted on the line. So, but I was surprised myself that it wasn't uniform. But they, again, and you talked about the international standards and what's going on in the UK. They were not offended by that at all. They thought that, they all expressed an interest in pursuing that. I appreciate the giggles over there.
Senator Deakin, supplementary?
Yeah, I still don't understand why there hasn't been any effort as it relates to this bill in particular. There was no effort to include C-65, which had made it to clause by clause. It could very easily have been pulled in, and the reason given by the lawyers was not a valid reason, in my opinion. But the second thing I just want you to think about for a second is we've got a situation where we've been discussing this before, exactly the same situation, almost 3 years ago. And the promise keeps coming, but we are not getting a clear answer, anything other than just the promise. No legislation has arrived. It hasn't started in the Senate, for example, to try and get a third-party perspective, because I think our unbiased view would hear the views of the elected officials and others as to why it needs to be different. But we're just not seeing any action, and I still haven't really heard a reason why. And that's why I think you're hearing a lot of people in this chamber saying, well, we've got to do something this time because the can keeps being kicked down the road. So you don't have, I just wanted to hear if you have something, any more you could offer.
Senator Cuzner.
Senator Deakin, the intent of the government, I'm sure, is to move forward with something. I appreciate with this new government. I was pleased with Senator Champagne when he appeared here in the spring. Minister Champagne, he wishes he was a senator. Minister Champagne, when he appeared here, and he was pushed on one aspect of this particular bill and how it proved no benefit to a group of Canadians with disabilities. And he had promised at the time to make it whole during the budget bill, and he did in fact do that. So I thought that was he came through with his promise on that. My sense is that this is what has to be done. But to adopt C-65, that bill had not been passed, there were still contentious aspects of it. And so hopefully those issues will come forward again in another piece of government legislation.
Senator McFedrin.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I have a rather different question.
Thank you.
And that is the figure that you've repeated a number of times in your speeches, which is a saving of $840 a year for a two-income family. Could you share with us the research that goes into that decision to choose that 1% cut and the significance of $840 a year, given that a family of two incomes with $50,000 income is actually considered at the lower end of a low-income definition in our country?
Senator Cuzner.
Yes, and it would be the lowest income brackets that are the greatest beneficiaries of this income tax cut. I see the government, and I've seen Senator Boudreau's bill come through with the GST, increase in the GST. The government is looking at, they can provide some relief through the income tax system. They can provide some relief through direct benefits, like they're doing with GST. And but we understand, the government understands that it's a difficult time for a lot of Canadians, and they believe that this will be the numbers that we received. From the parliamentary budget officer, there were a couple of people that provided, but I'd have to take trust, and I have to take faith in the numbers that were provided by the government, the Department of Finance, with the impact that this cut will make.
Senator McFedrin.
Well, perhaps just for a little more clarification on that, if I may. And that is, what we know is that in this country, a family with an income of $3,000 a month, or an individual with an income of $3,000 a month, is very close to the line of poverty in this country. So how is it that $840 a year is going to make a substantial difference for pretty much anyone in Canada?
Senator Cuzner.
Well, it will have an impact. The past governments have looked at direct benefits too. We look at the Canada Child Benefit, which brings almost $7,200 a year to families with children. We look at $10 a day childcare, which provides opportunities for more people in that household to get out and find employment. So those are the types of benefits that will have an impact in day-to-day lives. We can look at $850 as not a great deal, but I know that there'll be people that will look forward to that, and it will have an impact. It's broad-based, and again, it's focused specifically on the two lowest tax groups.
Senator Arnott.
Will the senator take a question?
Yes.
Senator Arnott.
Senator Cuzner, back to part 4. Senator Cuzner, you're aware that there's a case before the courts in BC, a BC Court of Appeal, dealing with the issue of the application of provincial privacy regimes on federal political parties. And that case will be argued in the near future, and it's quite likely that a decision would be forthcoming, but that would be for about a year. And that it's quite likely that that case, whatever the decision is, would be appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada for a final decision. And we know that the timelines for a case to get in front of the Supreme Court, argued and get a decision, could be 3 to 5 years. So in terms of the urgency of this Part 4 right now, it seems to me that the federal political parties and the federal government have about 3 to 5 years to get ready for a definitive answer by the Supreme Court of Canada. It seems to me that it's not as urgent as you think it may be.
Senator Cuzner.
Well, that would be something that would be decided upon by the legal minds and the legal opinions that the parties have received, and they believe that they want to bring it to a head before it goes to the courts.
Oui, Sénateur Carignan, vous avez une question?
Oui, j'ai une question, merci.
Senator Carignan.
Senator Cuzner.
Senator Cuzner. Tell me if I'm mistaken. Part 4 of C-4 has a few paragraphs only, and it refers to policies and how personal information is managed when political parties have hold of it. But it's part of a much broader whole, which is the Elections Act. The Elections Act has the creation of the elections list. It indicates how that list is to be made up, how it's to be updated, and also indicates how the election list is to be sent to the political parties and to the candidates in order to allow them to use it to communicate with electors, to recruit them, for them to become members, to recruit them, to get political donations, and it could also include other things. The entire system is designed in such a way as there is a legal authorization to hold that information and to communicate. And then there's the consent of the person when they decide to contribute or when they participate in activities. Am I mistaken that if we remove this section, we're removing something that is a complement to the entire Elections Act, and we remove additional protection for personal information for individuals?
Senator Cuzner.
I would think, I don't want to offer an uninformed opinion, but I would think you're correct on that, Senator. It would expose itself should it be taken out.